Hi all on Play Chess and streaming to YouTube. So there's a Kingscrusher radio show. I had originally penned in Tatar Still, but my brain isn't able to take in and discuss Grandmaster games. So I realised actually I haven't covered one of my over the board games, never got around to it. So instead, I mean, I'm hoping in a way I'm more prepared to do a presentation on one of my own games. And if you ever become a streamer or YouTuber yourself and you're an over the board player, it's totally perfect way of preparing a video actually, because you've already got the kind of notes and you know what the ideas were. And even if it's not a Grandmaster game, I think it's pretty interesting to go over your own over the board games if you ever want to get into become a YouTuber or whatever yourself and you're an over the board player. So anyway, this was actually from a few weeks ago. Now I guess one reason I didn't cover it, it was slightly low, it was lower rated. It was a kind of must-win scenario. Basically it was a must-win scenario. It was in the North Circular League, this game, played on the 23rd of January 2017. So we were Barnet Elizabethans, one of my local chess clubs. I play for two. So one is Barnet Elizabethans and the other is Muswell Hill. Anyway, this match we were playing against Barking 1 and they came to visit us at our home place. So I was on board 3. They didn't have their strongest team actually out. So my opponent was only he's 142 ECF and I'm like, at the moment, I was 202 ECF at the time of this game. Okay, so there's quite a massive rating difference. Okay, let's see, but nevertheless, I think it did have some interesting points to it. So that's why I'm going to go over it. And also, as I say, my head's about to explode. It feels like I've got a headache, so I don't want to get into a Grandmaster game, which I don't really have the first clue about, generally. So let's see. This game, yeah. So he was white. He played c4. Let's flip the board. Okay, so c4, the English opening. Yeah, I played e5, so it's kind of an indication. It's like a reverse Sicilian defense. I know it's called the English opening, but at this point it's kind of like a reverse Sicilian defense. Knight c3, knight c6, knight f3, and here I've already got a contour of different pawn structures in my head here. When I play the move g6, I'm kind of anticipating. Let's connect to live book. G6 is one of the more popular moves, but apparently knight f6 has been played a lot. This sequence has been played a lot. There's been thousands of games here. Anyway, now I had this idea that I can play g6. He did play d4. The problem with g6, yeah, white can do this central thrust d4. And already one has to think about the possibility of having double pawns here. Now, double pawns are not always that bad. Especially, I think sometimes they can help control central squares. By the way, I am actually also going to be a bit more lucid and detailed on the positional side of things, because I'm just trying to compensate for having a massive headache. So you're not going to get loads of technical variations tonight. It's more going to be more waffle, as much waffle as you want. So I'm going to waffle on about certain aspects positionally in this game. But basically, yeah, he's challenging my e5 pawn. I don't want to play d6 because he could just get the queens off. Remember, he's much lower rated. It's a must-win position, must-win game. So I want to keep some dynamic play. And the only way I saw for doing this was taking on d4 in this position, because of course the knight here is ruled out e4. D6 is ruled out because I don't want d takes e. F6 just weakens loads of things. So e takes, and we have knight takes d4, and this hit here, I don't mind having the double pawns, so I play bishop g7. And players with white do actually often play knight takes c6 as played. They take up that gauntlet. So he did. If we look at some other alternatives, this has been played before, but I think black should be. There's been a few games from this position. I think it should be okay. Yeah, this position should be okay. Okay. So yeah, accepting the double pawns. Again, I don't want the queens off, so I take with the b pawn. So you can see the pawn structure here indicates that the b file in particular, the dark squares in particular, the possibility of loosening d5 later again, of course, especially if the bishop's there, is problematic. If I ever do want to play c5 and d6, I'll be loosening my light squares yet again. But at the moment, for this moment, it is actually quite comfortable how, although it's double pawns, that control of the d5 square. Now, actually, he kind of what I'm most concerned about in this type of position is the move g3. The reason for that is, as I say, g3 in the fianchetto would not obstruct the bishop as long as there's no e4 anytime soon, but it would mean d6 is ruled out. But you know, he didn't play this. He actually played in a different way. I think this is the greatest way, in my view, of playing it, and it is actually the most used move in this position, just to play g3. So for example, like this has been seen before. There's been hundreds of games from this position, but white's got a lot of pressure here and is thought to be slightly better. So this position has been seen before, and actually, you know, if white gets rid of the dark squared bishop, yeah, these double pawns aren't entirely great. But so I was quite pleased with this continuation. Instead of that g3, he actually played queen c2. Don't expect my opponent to be like a grandmaster, right? It is a low raised player, as I mentioned. So queen c2 has the idea of playing for e4. So I'll play knight e7, and he did play e4. And of course, well, not of course, pardon me, I'm prompted with pawns on light squares now that the d4 is slightly more vulnerable, right? It's sort of an Achilles heel. And furthermore, this bishop, I thought the e5 square could be a really useful square strategically at this point. If later I castled, use the fact that the f pawn isn't blocked by its own knight, and then have f5, f4. Already I had that idea that I could seal off the use of the e5 square in some way by having a pawn on f4. You kind of create a position where it's difficult to dislodge the piece on e5. If you think about this pawn structure here, can you see that if you get a pawn to f4 and a piece on e5, and it might not be the bishop, it might be the knight later rerouting to e5, it's going to be much harder for white to get rid of a piece on e5, which is a nice central occupation. So that was the idea. So I tried to implement that, and so bishop d3, but I didn't play f5 immediately here. d6, and now white castled, and I castled. So no, sorry, I didn't castle. I played actually h6. I think I might have been concerned about bishop g5. Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, I have already castled. Sorry, d6 castles. I mean f5 as opposed to h6. I might have been concerned about bishop g5, so I played this h6. It does create weaknesses, of course, to play h6, but I did want to rule out the possibility of this annoying pin. He played actually bishop e3, and now I try to get on with this plan of f5 to put a pawn, ideally on f4, to be able to use this e5 square. So that's really the plan here, positionally. He marks out the dark squares and tactically hits h6 though, F4 is ruled out at the moment, so king h7. But has it been ruled out permanently? That's the question. He plays actually rook ac1, and it gives the idea that actually he could be planning to expand the scope of this bishop and hit my pawns. Even if he paradoxically undoubles them, he will be left with a more active bishop on d3, and my pawns will be slightly looser. So that could be an example of when you can swap one apparent like theoretical structural weakness for a more practical one. I've often found that when looking at master games, that sometimes masters deliberately undouble pawns to get access to other things, squares and other weaknesses, which might actually be more exploitable. So I think I was concerned about him undoubling the pawns. I think one clear example of such a strategy was in a very classic, iconic game. Lasca beat Capablanca in an exchange royal pairs, so he'd inflicted double pawns, but later undoubled Capablanca's pawns, and because of that managed to get a knight into e6, and it was a fantastic game in some last round where Lasca was significantly older than Capablanca and managed to win. But that was a vivid reminder to me that sometimes to get access to weaknesses, you have to sort of transform them from, in a more theoretical sense, the double pawns. How exactly are they actually weak? How are they exploitable if there's no access to them? But I'll give you an example, right? So well, I played Queen E8. I didn't quite lock down on C5 just yet. I played actually Queen E8. So maybe, I think I was thinking I might be able to react with D5. I played Queen E8, which gives the idea that potentially the Queen might come over here. He plays actually Queen C2, and that is a kind of weakness of the last move. He's actually let F4 happen here, and this is my first actual real quandary because he's let F4 happen. I'm not just interested in that earlier positional plan now that I might have had of just playing Bishop E5. I'm also interested in the tactics of this particular position with F3, because F3 might have some sort of strategic agenda to it as well. Either it becomes a dangerous form pawn on F3, or it succeeds in fragmenting my opponent's kingside pawns. So F3 was actually like really tempting in this position, and if you put it for an engine, I think it might actually prefer F3. In fact, what move would you prefer if I give you 20 seconds? The positional intention, Bishop E5 or F3, what would you prefer in this position? So would you be on the stereotypical what your previous stuff was with Bishop E5, or would you play F3? Plan Bishop E5 or F3, what would you guys vote on stream if I give you some time to think about this? And I will add a Kibitzer to give you the Kibitzer view on this position with Stockfish 8. I can tell you that both moves are up there as serious candidates from Stockfish 8 perspective. One eventually becomes slightly, it's bubbling in the evaluations actually. There's some other possibilities mentioned as well. I'm going to turn that off. Okay, but both were at some point up there. So you like the idea of F3. I think F3 is pretty dangerous, but I don't think it's entirely terminal, for white. I think this is a line. I'll show you a line. This is analysis now. Why it might not be entirely terminal, or why it might be good for black. Yeah, this kind of thing is dangerous because splitting the structure and the light squares are weaker. This would be really quite good for black. Let's see if white can improve actually on that, because that was my stored analysis for f3. Let's see dynamically what I can come up with just now on f3. So we had takes bishop h3. There is an option here for white to play f4. Maybe this is actually an important exchange sack in this position, where black is slightly better, but it's like it's like hardly anything. Apparently, it's hardly anything. I don't know if my intuition was kind of telling me something like this. It is very strange how powerful our intuitions are, but I did have this idea that, well, if he does play dynamic like this, the lockdown which I was dreamed of doesn't happen. You know, there's no strategic crush, there's no strategic lockdown. I think as humans, when we play against other humans, this idea of having a lockdown is very reassuring on the opponent's counterplay. We're essentially using the pawn structure quite often as sort of gloves and sort of straitjackets for the opponent we want to. The engine's obviously thinking about any candidate moves in any position, doesn't have this wider idea of trying to lock down the opponent's counterplay. It's quite an abstract feeling. I don't know if my intuition was telling me f3 is too tactical, but of course if white does like move the rook, then yeah, it's going to be some sort of, you know, disaster, this position, because instead of f4 happening, now black has got access still to the f3 square, right? This does start to look extremely bad, this kind of continuation, but it's not entirely mandatory. And actually, as it goes, my opponent later demonstrated he is actually capable of doing sacrifices, as we'll see later, but I won't mention too. You know, this position is highly undesirable for white. This is just total like getting mated next move on g2. But what does white do? Bishop e3, then there's bishop e5, and it starts to be pretty nasty, right? But the point is, this, in a theoretical sense, this position wasn't forced to be arrived at, even if it does tactically crash through in this line, as we see in the other line. It's not mandatory, this sort of disaster scenario where white has to like end up losing material. It wasn't mandatory. There is a potential exchange sack. So just to run that through, g takes. There is a potential for playing f4 apparently. I don't know. You see, the way we play it sometimes, it's a sort of guarantee, isn't it? You can think of this position as a total guarantee that if you play bishop e5 as opposed to f3, you're guaranteed to be locking down all of these pieces. Actually, the whole battery is locked down with this blockade. You know, Nimzovich didn't just do my system, he actually did another book just called Deblockade, I believe. He had such a powerful belief in blockades, and I think he was tapping into the idea of positional security, basically, in a wider sense, that you essentially want to blockade all of the opponent's counterplay and be able to get on with what you want to do without any fuss. And that's like the way to play chess. You don't really want to indulge in some sort of tactical battle, because it's like being in a lottery. It's like playing the lottery. Yeah, the ideal is to blockade the opponent's position so they don't have counterplay, and then you just slowly prepare without the opponent having counterplay. Then you're winning lots of moves that you can do without any worries of what your opponent's going to do, and you can use that to build up a massive attack. That's a kind of ideal way of playing, especially, you know, some opponents are going to be like these calculators. They're going to spend ages and ages on every move calculating all of this stuff. The last thing you want with them are like open tactical skirmishes Ideally, you want this position. They're blockaded. The whole position is blockaded. The whole dynamic of their position is blockaded, right? And to me, that's what bishop e5, represents. I don't know if anyone appreciates what I'm saying. Actually, I don't know if this is gibberish, but look at this position, just from a positional sense and what we know about Nimzowitsch and blockades. Do you not think this is an ideal blockade position? Ideal blockade? If I asked you, would you say it's an ideal blockade? Just yes or no, or you're not sure? Because to me, okay, I'm saying that the position, we're locking down quite a lot of the opponent's resources, right? So you don't have to worry about what the opponent's doing too much, right? Is that the case? would you say? You see, also black has got an more aggressive pawn structure with the potential to increase space as well. It's not actually that white's just blockaded here. I think black has potential operations on the king side, and this is I think a lot of stuff in Nimzowitsch, my system was about this. The whole thing about prophylaxis and blockade, they're very linked. The concepts that you want to avoid all trouble before it even starts. A great prophylaxis is that you basically lock up the opponent's position, right? You lock down the opponent's resources. So anyway, so the game continued here with f3, which of course weakens some dark squares, and so of course I'm delighted with my position. But there is always the worry that c5 might happen. At the moment, there is a slight concern about c5 happening. Let's turn that off now. But for the moment, I risked that possibility. I haven't locked down the c pawn. Even if there's just one pawn which can potentially liberate, it's ideal to lock that down. But here, if I do a lockdown with c5, it does weaken the d5 square a bit. A knight could pounce there and hit, c7. And what am I doing, with c7? What, do I move my queen back? No, I wanted to attack with my queen. Ideally, in this position, I want to play like g5 and build up for g4, which isn't just about, by the way, checkmating, in my view. That's a great added bonus. But structurally, if you look at this g4 plan, which is typical, for King's Indian players, right? The g4 plan is not just about checkmating. If you can transform the pawn chain like this, then you've isolated the h pawn, and you've slightly weakened white actually on the light squares. You've slightly weakened the solidity of white's position for light squares, actually, and the central thing, as well as opening up the g file. Okay, so g5, and the opponent does want to challenge my best piece here. He plays knight e2, so he's going to challenge my best piece, but I'm ready to replace the blockader. I offer a replacement service, so knight g6, because a knight blockade is also one of Nimzowitsch's favourite when you blockade with knights, especially in front of double pawns. But here, it's just a single pawn. But okay, so bishop c3. But now here, because this knight's here, I think c5 is a little bit even more lucrative than earlier, because the d5 square is not so easily exploitable anymore, and I do try and lock down with c5 now. So it's all about positional lockdown at this point. It's just a positional lockdown, and you can see that this bishop in particular is not entirely happy compared to this one, right? It's locked down by its own pawns. So positionally, it's just very desirable, I believe, this kind of thing, this position here. There's prophylaxis going on in terms of locking down the opponent's resources. There's that sense of security, basically. Like locking a car, locking a house. Nimzovich is talking about positional security, analogous to all the security measures you'd make in real life, right? But on the chessboard, right? So on the chessboard, you might have to make sure the opponent can't be up to anything too dangerous. So, okay, so Queen D2, Bishop E6, and there's a hint that I might try and weaken White on the dart squares later, maybe a battery here. And there's also, of course, if B3 is played, remember this file over here, there's a transformation possibility that if B3 is played, I could even, as if A5 wasn't, in some theoretical sense, I might be able to create a backward pawn on the semi-open file, which obviously is another desirable thing. But if you're trying to play on both sides of the board, you've got to be wary, like how resources are split. If I'm going to try and use the B file and a backward pawn on B3, what if I did want an operation on the G file? Ideally, I want the rooks maybe doubled on the G file, right? Not chasing a backward B pawn. You're splitting your resources up. That's the thing. Now, if you double rooks or even treble, then it creates enormous. The sum is greater than the parts. So the idea of going for a backward B pawn, although tempting here, it doesn't convince me, because also in the short run it's difficult anyway. It can actually be taken, and in the long run, as I say, I really want this G file to maybe treble pressure later. So I'm having in mind the G file more than some sort of structural thing here with the backward pawn. But backward pawns are like meat and potato of positional players to torture. But yeah, I'm slightly biased towards the G file here. So Queen F7, and with the idea that later I might be able to prepare G4. So Queen B2. Now actually I play Queen F6 in this position, and actually he sneaks over as though he's tickling my little isolated A pawn, as if he's trying to interfere with any like rooks, but obviously to gain a bit of time I could be prepared to sacrifice my little A pawn. It wouldn't mind. I don't think I'd be in huge danger if I checkmated the opponent and the opponent has an extra A pawn, which is 6 million years away from queening. That's not a major concern at this moment. Okay, but what I do is actively replace the blockader now on E5 by taking on C3. So we have rook takes C3, and now knight E5. And you'll note here tactically that if the knight moves, then knight takes F3 check would win that rook. We have bishop B1, and now I want to sort of double these rooks, and there's two ways you might think of doubling these rooks if you want to play for the G4 thing, which at the moment seems fairly ruled out because of the F4 issue. But one way is like this, but I thought maybe a more flexible, interesting way is rook F7, which might actually mean maybe even C6, and then rook G7 this one. All right. So we have Queen C1 in this position. Rook G8. Yeah, I'm brewing this G4 at the moment. So, as I say, it's a position of blockade where I'm still increasing my position, and the opponent, I don't have to worry about what the opponent is doing that much at the moment. It's only if the game gets tactical, then you have to sort of calculate like crazy. But the ideal is, you don't want the opponent to have too much counterplay. Okay, so King H1, and even here I'm thinking, why not just improve my position? The bishop, might see some sort of threat later against my king, so I actually move my king off a dark square. That's a kind of prophylaxis move, because I can take my time here. Time has been earned in the position because the opponent's counterplay is kind of minimal, and if you've got time, that is a kind of prophylaxis against you know, maybe that's a bit safer, slightly safer on H8 if the position was going to open up. So Queen D2, it's clear he's targeting my F4 all the time, and also he's kind of ready in two ways for G4, laterally as well as this way. He's ready in two ways for F4, you know. So I want to take my time here and make sure that when I do G4, it's not, I'm not going to be losing all my pieces one by one. So Queen G6 for the moment. Now, yeah, he plays Knight G1, so it looks actually like really solid defensive play at the moment. Knight G1, and I play. Actually, I'm thinking. Well, I will be concerned about F4 here, right? So I actually reinforce F4 now with Rook G F8. He plays Bishop C2, and I think the position is now ripe. It's now, I believe, ripe enough. The time is ripe. The apple should be picked off the tree. Yeah. Do you think for G4, if I asked you, is G4 right time now? Because, yeah, you have that luxury. You've earned time in the position by shutting down the opponent's counterplay with blockade, etc. But you have to time perfectly, like the strategic breaks, and make sure you've got perfect preparation then, ideally. You've got no excuse because you had all the time in the world, right? But the question is it right to play G4 like in this position? Should G4 be played now? Should G4 be played now? I did play G4, yeah. And the funny thing is, it occurred to me here that, you know, I did lose my precious bishop, and my dark square campaign without the bishop doesn't seem so good. But I had this idea that actually, you know, my opponent, although it doesn't look like it, I had the glimmer of a thought intuitively that my opponent could end up actually being weak on light squares, despite having this locked in bishop protecting the light squares. That is one benefit of that bishop, but I thought my opponent could become weak on light squares, and in fact the speed at which that happens now is remarkable. So after takes, bishop takes, he blunders immediately with bishop d1. Yeah, weakness of the last move. Yeah, he's collapsing on the light squares now. It was originally the dark squares, but yeah, I thought, hold on a sec. Can I not risk taking on e4 here? I didn't believe this is some sort of trap, you know, to take on e4. But of course you need to like check things, because the bishop could come back to this diagonal. Let's actually check. Is bishop c2 dangerous? He actually took on g4. Let's have a quick check. Maybe bishop c2 is the way to play it. No, it's not mentioned. Knight f3 is mentioned. If bishop c2, queen d4. Okay. So anyway, he took, right, knight takes, and we're back to dark squares and entrenchment on dark squares. So I thought, well, this is fantastic. I'm a pawn up. I have a knight on e3. My opponent's going to be resigning soon, right? Wrong. Knight f3, knight e3. Now I have this idea. Okay, I'm hitting the rook. I'm having this idea. I need to find the downsides of the opponent's position. No problem. Downsides, how can I tap into them? Downsides, just take on g2 and take on f3, end of game. That was my downside analysis here. Pawn up, low rated opponent, he's gonna resign soon, right? So rook g7. He plays queen d3. I don't want the exchange of queens because I'm thinking, hell, I need the queen for torture purposes on this diagonal, right? To have this threat of rook g2. I don't want to exchange off queens. Would anyone exchange off queens here? Would you exchange off queens, or would you try and do something else? What would you guys play here? Black to play. I know you're a pawn up, and you might think there's a formula to being material up that you exchange off everything. So, what do you reckon? Do you exchange queens, or do you try and keep the queens on? What do you guys do here? Black to play. Well, I went for queen c6 actually, because I wanted to keep this idea that maybe, you know, rook takes g2, because we're interfering with the protection of f3, and then queen f3, and it'll be disaster, right? And he plays the move queen e2, and I think I underestimate this move. Now, let me see what you guys would play in this position, because I'll tell you my thought process as well. I'm trying to, you know, tap into the opponent's downsides, which is essentially, I saw it as the g2 pawn. So that explains my move, but you might have other ideas in this position. I might have shown this to some people on the server a few weeks back. If you have seen this game, shush. But yeah, there's something about actually my opponent's last move, which maybe could choose. You could choose greater caution around your next move here. What would you do? What move would you do? How many of you would consider doubling, or would you play something else? Some of you might have seen some of you might have seen this before. Just as the game was, I thought, getting wrapped up. Yeah. All right, let's take a poll vote, right? Rook fg8 or rook e8. Okay. Okay, I'm going to give you a choice. Rook fg8 double or rook fe8. Which one would you choose? That's interesting. Someone said natural move is rook g8. You mean, yes, the natural move, you think. The natural move is rook fg8. Doesn't it look so natural, the natural move? This move looks so natural, doesn't it? Okay. Looks natural, right? You know what? I do talk about weaknesses of the last move, but sometimes there's like strengths of the last move, because also the other side of a weakness is a strength. And the opponent, when he played queen e2, you know, this is like the car park metaphor, yeah? You can drive around the car park for ages trying to find the space, but sometimes you just need to look where someone is going to get their car out of the car park. And in chess terms, you look at the last move, and also, you know, you look at the weaknesses of the last move, and you look at the strengths. Now, one strength is that the queen protects f3, but there's also another secret strength of the last move, which is like someone, you watch someone walking to their car, you just you just stalk them for the car park space which they're about to vacate. But here, with the car park metaphor, actually, you know, this rook is hitting e3, and the natural move is sure, fantastically natural, because yeah, it ticks this box, right? Rook g2. It's supernatural to double rooks. It's supernatural to have everything coordinated on g2. Everything's supernatural about this move, rook fg8. It's not the engine's choice. The engine kind of actually, with calculation, realizes that there's a slight snag with rook fg8, and as humans we have to use the car park metaphor to say, you know, rook takes e3 is a strength of queen e2. It's actually a discovered attack in a way. When queen e2 was being played, this is a discovered attack move, and actually I'm in big trouble now after this, because my opponent played rook takes e3, just wiping out, and also ending up going to be hitting h6. So in fact the strongest move is rook e8, reinforcing everything, taking account of the, you know, the strengths of the opponent's last move, the threat, in fact, the discovered threat, because here black could build up without too much risk, for example like this, and crash through. White's in a kind of zugzwang here with this powerful centralization. There's still possibilities of rook g2 and also queen b1. It's kind of terrible, yeah, this position for white. In fact, on queen d2, let's see, queen d2, there's in fact rook takes g2, but even stronger might actually be sitting on the position. It's changing its mind a bit. So yeah, just rook e3 totally reinforces against the peculiarities created by that last move, which was in fact this discovered attack. Now you'll see that this casual natural move in this position instead allows rook takes e3, yeah, and this echoes actually the previous episode that I showed you in the game. If you remember the previous episode when I asked about f3 or bishop e5, the opponent has shown he is capable of sacrificing the exchange, right? So Nimzovich was right. The opponent is not to be trusted. The more resourceful the opponent, yeah, they're going to sacrifice things as well. Yeah, he's broke all the binds in the position. He's put me on a total back foot here in this position, because not only he's erasing all my pieces, he's threatening queen takes h6 now. Everything I had in mind to show the downsides of the position has just been erased. He's just got the big pencil eraser and just wiped out all my pieces from the board. Yeah. My advantage, if it still exists, is absolutely minimal, and this was a must-win game. The problem here, right? I'll give you two choices to try and play this position on. Would you choose rook g6, all right, or would you choose queen d7? So I'll give you the two candidates, and you think about them. Yeah, rook g6 in this new position, which we didn't need to have because we didn't take account of the strength of the opponent's last move, or queen d7. What would you choose here? Rook g6 seems natural again, does it? Or queen d7, which doesn't seem so natural. Rook g6 or queen d7? What do you reckon is a good move here? Any ideas? Now this is a low rate player. Now I'm just going to engine check this, right, just to make sure this is not total nonsense as well. Because I think I might have actually played a good move in this position. Right, Queen d7 is up there. Now Rook g6 is not up there, it's not in the top three, so you lose 500 points. The problem with Rook g6, can you guess what White would have in this position, which is a total pain, an utter pain. I mean, seriously painful. It in fact leaves White with nearly a clear advantage. There's a move which actually leaves White with nearly a clear advantage in this position. Can you see what that is? So Rook g6. Can you see what White would play here? What is it about natural moves which make them so bad? They're not really listening, are they, to the opponent's threats, natural moves. Because this position is no way good for Black anymore. The king's safety has become quite bad. There's only one pawn here. Can't move the rook. Have to give back the exchange. It's just horrible. Yeah, I mean this is a disaster, isn't it? Where does the rook go? In fact, I don't know what Black actually does here. Let's see what Black can do in this position. I didn't go for this. If Black does this, then it's actually a mate in 5. So much for natural moves. Check. I mean, as an example, check. Check. Ah, that's where natural moves get you. You see? No. I actually managed to see something like this, and I thought, okay, I've got to give this pawn up to get my queen over here to control some dark squares. So Queen d7 is a move up there, and the strongest is apparently d5. Let's have a look. D5, because that actually defends tactically h6 immediately, and then Rook e8, which attacks. And if the queen moves, then we can do this, and Black's okay. But my move is okay as well. Queen d7. Black still got something. The idea is revealed now. Well, he did take, and I could get my queen to g7, you see. So I'm sacking a pawn to make sure I'm not getting completely killed. Okay, the exchange up. So check, Queen g7. So yes, he's got 2 connected potential passed pawns though. Queen takes g7, Rook h takes g7. I know, it's a big fight. It's a big, long-winded fight, this game. I thought it was going to be all over, and now I have to win the game all over again from this position, and it's going to be hard, and it's potentially losing for Black. Because if the king and the 2 connected passed pawns come down the board, it's going to be bad. I'll try and activate the rooks. He seals the entry points. Try and go over here. Try and get in here with now plan of d5. Try and create a passed pawn. Yeah, the knight's going to a very nice looking square. Yep. It's not all rosy, I gotta say. I'm playing for d5. I play for d5. I think he starts going a bit wrong. So he goes here, and yeah, I'm running out of pawns. I'm going to be down to my last pawn soon. Yep, I'm running out of pawns. But I think I've still got the edge now. Yeah, this pawn is enough. It could have been different. He could have put a much stronger resistance, but he was in time trouble by that point. And yeah, this pawn's enough to win. The knight's not coming back. So I think there's a few things about this game, about shutting down the opponent's counterplay, not underestimating the opponent, not underestimating the strength of the last moves, the discovered attacks, even if they are sacrificial discovered attacks. You know, they could just erase your position sometimes. Everything you think is going to crush the opponent can actually be literally erased on the chessboard. So anyway, I hope you got something from this game. You know, don't underestimate you know, your opponents, especially if they're lower rated. You know, I had to be resourceful after his exchange sack just to try and stay on the board, basically. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Have a good week. See you next week. Thanks very much. Comments, questions, likes, appreciate it on YouTube. Cheers then. Oh, should we have a quick vote here? 1 enjoyed, 10 boring. Quick vote if you want. Oh, actually, it doesn't get recorded on YouTube, so see you next week. Alright, cheers then.